So our only goal should be not to infringe on free will and be true to our free will. That's the one standard we have to apply to every relationship if we want balance. You are not obligated to be in relationship with anyone, not your mom, not your dad, not your partner, not even your own children. Nobody is required to be a part of your life. God wants you to have the freedom to create your reality. You have all the right to not want that person to be in your life anymore. So you can absolutely cut people out of your life without creating negative karma. But if you don't, you do create negative karma. Why? Because you're not balanced yet. So this subject of spiritual balancing in our relationships has a lot of nuance to it that we need to understand. Because if we don't have a good grasp for how the nuances work, how the practical application works, then the concept can't really do us a whole lot of good, right? We can talk about these concepts that we teach here all day long. But at the end of the day, if we don't really know how to apply them practically to our life, then what good are they really doing us, right? So since we all know here that embodiment is the name of the game that we're all playing, not just learning, but embodiment, then it's really only how we apply a concept that really matters or benefits us in any way. So the really cool thing is, if we have a concept that is based in truth, even if we don't really understand it or have its application down yet, it's still just kind of a mental idea that we're playing with. We like it, we resonate with it, but we're not really sure how to fully apply it. The cool thing is, the universe will totally meet us there, and it will begin to teach you how to use and apply this concept you're holding on to. This is how the intelligence of life acts on our behalf. We're always being guided, we're always being taught. But are you paying attention? Is the only question. And so this is how I've learned every concept that I teach here. Many years ago, I read The Law of One for the first time, about 10 years ago, and I found all of these brilliant, incredible concepts that I resonated with so much. And yet, even the basic idea of positive, negative polarity, I read that in The Law of One and all the descriptions about it. I'm like, yeah, I get this. This makes sense. There's two polarities. Of course there are. We have archetypes of good and evil in every religion from ancient times to today. Of course there's polarity. But I didn't really understand how that concept applied to my day-to-day life. And literally, polarity influences every thought, every feeling, every action, every event in the universe. But I wasn't seeing that. I just had this idea of polarity that I wasn't able to translate yet into my life, but it was in process. Yeah? And so now, today, everywhere I look, literally all I see are the workings of the two polarities. I cannot unsee it. I see it in every statement people make. As people speak to me, there's an awareness also happening of what kind of charge is behind their words, whether it's positive or negative. And this is very useful awareness to have to be of service to people, right? Because if I can feel into the energy behind their words or actions, I'm much better equipped to help them where they are, right? So I want to gain this awareness of polarity, but I have to be able to embody it, right? Not just know about it as a mental concept. And that takes time and practice and learning and trial and error. But this is what the universe is doing for all of us. The moment you resonate with a truth, a concept, a principle, as long as that principle is based in truth, like polarity, then the universe goes right to work integrating it into your awareness. It's bringing you every event and circumstance and relationship that you need to see those principles at play. So you can go, oh, I see how polarity influenced that whole conversation. Wow, now I'm getting it. Who can relate? This is the difference between the two components of our SQ, awareness of truth and then embodiment of that truth or that awareness. We definitely have to be aware that polarity exists, and we have to understand it and mentally know the basics of it, right? So that it can start making a home in us. So the awareness, the understanding is the masculine principle, absolutely essential. But if we just have that, we don't have complete SQ yet. We need to translate that learning to embodiment, which only happens, I will repeat, which only happens through our life experiences and how we show up in our life to apply the truth. So with all that being said, spiritual balancing is one of the most important concepts that my life has studiously taught me day in and day out. Since the moment I learned about this concept from the Law of One, I was so intrigued of spiritual balancing. Wow, this resonates for some reason. This really feels like the main task we're given in this life is to balance everything with love. But I don't really know how to do that or how that applies to practical situations. So you've got to learn day by day, moment by moment, right? But almost not a day goes by that I don't learn something about spiritual balancing and the dynamics of it, right? The application of it. There's always a new insight coming through. And this is what I want for all of you. So if you love these teachings, if you long to embody them, then your life will and already is teaching you how to do that. You just have to pay attention. So for today's lesson, I'm going to share with you some of the important dynamics that life has taught me, specifically as it pertains to spiritual balancing in relationships. So we know that every human relationship has its own unique balance, right? Because every person's unique. So you can't have the exact same identical relationship with any two people. And that should be obvious. You can't and shouldn't have the same relationship with your wife or husband or partner that you have with your best friend or your parents, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. So every relationship is a unique balance, and you have to find what that unique balance is. But it's like, what is it based on? What is balance based on in any relationship? And it's this. Balance is based upon the level of maturity or development of both souls involved in the relationship. Why? Because we have to meet people where they're at. So for example, many people in our lives, right, are very young souls. Maybe they're unconscious of who they are. They're still identified with ego. They're not really on a conscious spiritual path yet. So what does a balanced relationship look like with those kind of people in our lives? Well, if someone hasn't matured very much spiritually, then having balance with an unconscious person who's heavily identified with their ego is going to look very different than balance with a very spiritually mature person. So if we want to be in loving relationship with anybody, the first thing we have to be able to do is be aware of where they're at. First discipline. So spiritual balancing, as we learn it here, has to do with these three disciplines of the personality from the Law of One. Know thyself, love thyself, and then once you've done those two things, then you can become the creator. If you're still a victim in any way at all, you can't become the creator. You can't move on to the third discipline. We have to know ourselves and love ourselves completely, and then we can truly create from our preference. The same disciplines apply to every relationship. First, we got to know where somebody's at. We've got to be aware of who and where they are. And then two, we have to accept them where they are. And this is the biggest problem in our difficult relationships, right? It's basically just the difficulty to just accept where somebody is. That can be a big challenge, right? Because we want them to be more mature than they are. We want them to be more loving than they are. And yet, they're not. And so are we to deny reality and fight against reality and force them to be more loving and force spiritual concepts down their throat, whether they like it or not? It's for their own good. That doesn't sound very loving, does it? But that's what spiritual ego wants to do, right? It wants to shove our concepts down everybody's throat. You've got to believe what I believe. You've got to see the truth that I see. If you don't, I'm going to make you see it. And all these passive aggressive ways we punish people for their lack of spiritual maturity. We try to expose their judgments and biases. The spiritual ego can run wild with our own spiritual concepts like this and weaponize them against people. And we really don't want to do that, because there's a lot of negative karma that comes with that. So, number one, are you paying attention to their state of being? That's number one. Know thyself. Know thyself. They're another version of you. You must know where they are in the same way. That's know thyself. So if this person is hurting today, if they're upset, if they're holding on to negative energy of some kind, insecurity, whatever it is, do you have the SQ required to be aware of these things? And I don't mean you have to have some crazy level of psychic intuition where you can read their mail and tell them what happened to them yesterday and why they're feeling this way today. And no. Just the basic, like, can you feel their energy? Are they struggling today? Are they having a tough day? Are they really positioned in a ideology that they're attached to, and whether it's religion or politics? Like, you've got to be able to see where this person is. And that requires you to be at a higher frequency than them. If you're at the same frequency as them, you can't see where they are from a higher perspective. You are locked in the battle with them. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. You're wrong. I'm right. You're going to play that game. So you've got to be coming from a higher frequency to see where people really are. That requires that you are working on yourself, yeah? And if you're on this call right now, that's a foregone conclusion. You're obviously here because you love working on yourself and raising your consciousness. So be aware of where this person is. That's number one. Number two, can you accept where they are? Those are not the same two things, right? How many times have you guys been able to be fully aware of where your mother-in-law or whoever is? This is a very unconscious soul, deeply identified with ego, lost in stories of victimhood, and you're fully like aware that that's where they are, and yet they're just, they're triggering you, they're getting under your skin, you can't remain in love, it's super hard, you get offended, you get upset, you get annoyed. They're not the same thing. We have masculine and feminine principles here. We have to do both. We have to be able to know where someone is and accept them for where they are. And the big point here that I always have to stress, which I'm happy to do because it is the biggest confusion of what love, acceptance, forgiveness really means. By accepting where somebody is, it doesn't mean we want them to stay there. We're good with what they're doing and thinking and behaving. We hope they continue to do what they're doing. No, we always wish for the highest good of somebody. Of course, we always wish for their healing, for their salvation from suffering, all of that. But we also have the wisdom with that love to know, I can't force them to awaken. I can't force them to heal. I have no ability to force this person to do anything. And I don't want to. So I accept where they are today, knowing this person's eternally one with God. They're on an evolutionary journey. They will eventually heal. Maybe not in this lifetime, but that's okay. Maybe they'll heal in the next lifetime. It's not my responsibility when they wake up or when they heal. Love can feel hard. Yeah. Love, acceptance, compassion can feel very difficult. But if it does feel difficult, please hear me on this. If it does feel difficult, it just means you're not fully integrated in fourth density consciousness yet. That's all. No big deal. Not an indictment, not a judgment. We just have to pay attention to our inner world, because our inner world, our reactions, our feelings, our thoughts, everything is a reflection, right? Everything is showing us where we are. So if I find it hard to love anybody, even the worst, cruelest tyrant on earth, if I can't easily feel love for everybody, then I have more heart-based consciousness to integrate. That's all that means. And so I can work on it right now by forgiving this person, by striving to understand them. And this is what spiritual balancing is. In the Law of One, Ra says, the art of spiritual balancing, when you're triggered by somebody, is to mentally go deeply into that perspective, put yourself in their shoes, consider their perspective of, why do they feel this way? Why do they think it's okay to do this, say this, etc., believe this? And you try to imagine what it's like to be that person in that perspective. And you just keep contemplating their perspective until you're like, oh, okay, I get it. They've been hurt, or they grew up in this culture that taught them these things, whatever. There's always a reason why somebody believes something. Everyone's right from their perspective. This is a law we must all accept and get over it and move on. There's no villains in the universe. There's nobody that's just like twirling their mustache on the inside saying, I'm evil and I hate everybody and I want to kill people for fun. Like nobody, not even the sixth density negative being thinks like that. That's a cartoon caricature of the negative polarity. Everyone feels very justified in what they're doing. Even a serial killer feels justified, right? I've been hurt, I've been abandoned, I've been abused, I've had a tough life, people have been unfair to me. It's time to dish out some medicine to other people. It's only fair. This is how I make balance, right? I've been harmed, I'm gonna harm others. It makes sense to them, you understand? And so We don't have to agree, and we shouldn't agree. We shouldn't agree with any perspective because all perspectives are relatively true and absolutely false, right? Any unique individual perspective can only be true from that perspective. It can't be true absolutely for everyone everywhere in the universe. So no perspectives are absolutely true, and yet they're all relatively true, right? So we don't need to agree or disagree with any belief in the universe. And we should remove the notion of agreeing or disagreeing with anything. It doesn't apply, right? If somebody believes something, it's true to them. So what good is it for you to be like, I disagree? Okay, well, they disagree with you, so it's a stalemate, right? The only way forward is to understand their perspective. And then you can actually meet them where they are. You can speak their language. You can help them see insights they may be lacking in their perspective. You can offer them assistance, right? You can say, well, I understand why you feel that way, and I would feel the same way if I were in your shoes. You can say that to anybody. You could say that to Hitler and it would be true, right? If you were Hitler, you would have done everything Hitler did. You would have had the same exact mind, the same exact conditioning, the same exact life experiences, and so on and so forth. So let us never get too big for our britches by thinking we're fundamentally better than anyone, right? If I was in anyone's shoes, I would see what they're seeing. I would believe their perspectives too. So you can look anyone in the eyes and say, I understand your perspective. I get it. I'm not holding your perspective against you. That's what people need to hear and feel to feel safe with you, right? And you can say, but have you ever thought about it this way? What about da 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 da? And now that they have your understanding, they're going to be much more open to what you're offering. If you're like, I disagree, let me tell you why. You're just never going to get an ego in a corner with its arm behind its back saying, Uncle, Uncle. You can't get someone's ego in that position. The harder you fight against their ego, the harder their ego fights you, right? It's just becomes an ego fist fight. You can't bludgeon somebody's ego into agreeing with you. But isn't that what our spiritual egos always want to do? So you got to be aware of that. It's part of your SQ is there's a way in which I can reach this person right now, but it's through love and understanding first. Why? Because only love can depolarize negative energy. So if someone's coming at you with negative energy, they've got a charge of, I'm right, let me tell you one thing. Jesus said, agree with your adversary quickly. What? Come on, Jesus. I don't want to agree with my adversary. They're wrong. No, he's not saying agree with their mental concepts. He's saying agree with their basic perspective of where they're coming from, right? They think they're right. Agree with them and say, I understand why you think that. And then there's a depolarization that happens. Now there's not really a fight here anymore, right? There's not really a fight going on. There's an attempt to understand going on. And that's where two souls can really meet. So love, understanding people, having compassion for people is effortless and automatic in fourth density consciousness. That's how you know you're living from 4D, is that love is, you literally won't remember how or why you used to perceive people without love. When you're living from 4D consciousness, it truly feels weird to you to not have love for people. You're like, what? How did I see them before? Did I see people as not God? Like, what? There's only God. That makes no sense. You lose the ability to connect with judgment when you're living from 4D. It makes no sense, right? It's not intelligent to you anymore because you've raised your spiritual intelligence. When you raise your spiritual intelligence, what is below your level of intelligence no longer seems intelligent, right? You see the flaws and the errors in the ego's way of thinking. You're like, oh, that's actually less intelligent to judge people. And so it just drops away, right? When you see what's not intelligent, it naturally drops away with no effort required. The seeing of it is what makes it drop away. Seeing things as they are is what makes them lose influence, right? So how do we apply the third discipline now? We've done the first two. We understand where this person's at. We accept them where they're at. That doesn't mean we agree with what they're saying or doing. It means we have compassion and we understand that their perspective seems right to them. Okay, now we can move on to the third discipline. Become the creator. I want to take a quick pause from today's video to let you know that if you want more help staying consistent in these practices and integrating these teachings,
then I want to invite you to join our brand new 4D University student membership. Our student program comes with 8 foundation courses that walk you systematically through all the core teachings of 40U, with daily lesson practices given for every single lesson to help you truly start living from 4th density consciousness here and now. You'll also get access to our live bi-weekly calls where you can come submit your questions, hear live teachings, and have an opportunity to receive personal guidance from yours truly. So if you're ready to take your spiritual intelligence to the next level, then come try out our 40U student membership and receive all the practical guidance you need to truly live and embody heart-based consciousness. You can learn more and enroll at the link in the description below. And now, back to the video.
So how do we apply this discipline? Well, how does become the creator apply to a relationship? First, we must remember that become the creator really just means choose your preference. When you guys hear me say or anyone say, or you see it written somewhere, law of one, doesn't matter, become the creator, translate it in your brain as seeing choose your preference, because that's what it means. It's the ability to consciously and intentionally decide what reality you want to live in, and then to live in that reality, regardless of circumstance. Because the reality you live in is solely dependent on your perception of what's happening in your environment. It's the way you interpret your life that determines what reality you live in. So once you've balanced your masculine and feminine polarities, awareness and love, you can now choose your preference from a place of neutrality and balance. Yeah, so this point is huge, you guys. And this is the first big point I want everybody to understand. You are not obligated to be in relationship with anyone on the physical plane, is what I mean. You are not obligated by the universe or by God or something to you have to be in a relationship with this person. They must be in your life. No. You are under no such obligation from the universe to keep any person in your life, not your mom, not your dad, not your partner, not even your own children. Nobody is required to be a part of your life. God wants you to have the freedom to create your reality. So you can absolutely, if we want to use this term, it sounds like a negative term, but cut people out of your life who aren't in alignment with your chosen preference. You can absolutely do that from a place of love and balance without creating negative karma. Yeah. But if you don't have awareness of where they are and acceptance for where they are, and then you try to kick them out of your life, you do create negative karma. Why? Because you're not balanced yet. All imbalances create negative karma. Actually, all imbalances are negative karma. It's the same thing. Cause and effect, right? So if someone is consistently abusive towards you, why should you like being around them? You don't have to like everyone, but you have to love everyone. Do you get the distinction here? Why should you like being abused? No one's asking you to like being around your abuser or like their current expression of who they are. You don't have to enjoy it or prefer it. You're fully given the free will that God wants us all to have to not enjoy being around abuse. And you shouldn't enjoy it because love doesn't abuse. So you don't have to want to be around them. It's just not your chosen energy. It's not your chosen frequency. You have all the right to not want that person to be in your life anymore. And you can completely excommunicate them from your life in a loving way. But if and only if you can accept and forgive them for where they are. Otherwise, you're going to create negative karma because you're in resistance to them. So forgiveness is the key to all spiritual balancing. And in fact, spiritual balancing really is just forgiveness. You know, when I tell you to consider the perspective of the person that's triggering you, like using the politics example, if people on the far right who are just, I'm so triggered by far left people, I can't stand them. Okay, well, how you need to balance that is you need to contemplate being someone on the left. And why do they think how they think? Why do they believe the things they believe? Why do they hold the perspectives they hold? Can you just understand why somebody would hold those perspectives? That is forgiveness, you guys. That is the giving up of a grievance you're holding against somebody. So forgiveness literally just means cutting the karmic tie you created with someone by judging them or resisting them. That's it. Forgiveness just means, I refuse to be entangled with you and your negative karma anymore. I wish to be free of the influence of your negative karma. That's all it means. That's forgiveness. And so forgiveness really is the second discipline, right? Love thyself, love thy neighbor, right? To accept someone is to forgive them, to not hold their actions against them. So what does spiritual balance look like in an abusive relationship? Well, it looks like cutting that person out of your life. That's balance. Come on, Aaron. Cutting someone out of your life is balance? Oh, you better believe it is. This is so simple, you guys, when you see this. This isn't a complex situation, although it tends to be the most often asked question around this subject is, oh, you're just saying if I forgive someone, I just let them walk all over me and abuse me? And at what point do I draw a loving boundary? People always ask. Imagine, imagine the scenario of being in an abusive relationship, right? You've got one person who wants to abuse the other and one person who doesn't want to be abused. Okay, here's the situation. I want to abuse. I do not want to be abused. How do you balance that, you guys? Can someone explain how you could find balance in that? Like, okay, honey, you want to abuse me because I love you so much. I will let you abuse me, but it's got to be a balanced abuse. So you can abuse me 50% of the time, and then you give me 50% of the other time to not be abused. Okay, so Monday through Thursday afternoon, you get to abuse me. Thursday afternoon through Sunday evening, you don't get to abuse me. Now we're balanced, 50-50, abuse and non-abuse. We've achieved it, you guys. It's like, that's not how you find healing in any regard. It's not tit for tat. It's not eye for an eye. It's not tooth for tooth. Jesus said, you've heard it was said in the days of old, an eye for an eye. But I say to you, a new commandment. Love your enemies. Bless those who persecute you. Do good to them. Turn the other cheek. Walk the extra mile. And in doing so, Jesus said, you will heap burning coals on their head. Interesting expression. Very first century expression of depolarization. Pretty interesting, huh? What does it mean to heap burning coals on someone's head? He's trying to draw the parallel that you're depolarizing their negative energy. You're diffusing them when you return good for evil, love for attack. So balance cannot possibly look like trying to find equal balance between love and hate. Those two energies cannot be balanced. They're opposites. So you better believe that excommunicating an abusive person from your life is the only way to have balance with that relationship. Why? Because one person wants to abuse, the other wants to not be abused. And so what is the first rule, you guys, of love, of being of service to others? Put it in the chat. We know that the first principle of the positive polarity is what? What do we have to never violate on the positive polarity? What do we have to never do to someone if we want to stay on the positive polarity? Free will. Very good, Aman. We have to honor their free will. We have to do no harm. Yeah? Do no harm. That's love. Do no harm is service to others, is the positive polarity. So how do you balance the free will of an abuser and someone who doesn't want to be abused? Here's the nuance. On the positive polarity, we're not in the business of granting and fulfilling everybody's desires, you guys. Honoring free will doesn't mean you have to do whatever somebody asks you to do. By no means, right? You have to be always true to your polarity. So if somebody asks you to be abusive or hateful or unloving, you have to say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I live according to love only. And now, am I doing harm to somebody by not giving in to their demands? By not doing what they're asking? Of course not. Not doing something can't be harmful. Like if someone says, do this, and you just say, no, thank you. It's impossible to harm somebody with a no thank you if it doesn't align with your chosen polarity. Now, your chosen polarity is service to others. So if someone's actually hurting or in need or in danger and they're like, help, and you're like, no, thank you, that would be doing harm, because as a positively polarized being, your entire existence depends on serving others and helping them. But granting an ego its personal desires, not helping that ego. It's perpetuating the ego. It's enabling the ego. So if someone's like, hey, can you buy me some heroin today? It's not loving or of service to be like, of course, whatever you say, I want to honor your free will. So hopefully we all get that. I probably don't need to belabor that point any further. But you are absolutely entitled to say, no, thank you, that's not for me. And you can't possibly do harm to somebody by just simply choosing your preference. We are only required not to infringe on people's free will, not to violate them or harm them in any way, right? So, as a positive being, you must lovingly refuse to grant any request from someone else that doesn't line up with the law of one. And I'm going to read a quote to you from the law of one, where Ra explains this. Okay, so Dawn says, could you amplify the meaning on what you say by failure to accept that which is given? I am Ra. At the level of time-space at which this takes place in the form of what you may call thought war. Okay, so pause, sorry. Context here is they're talking about the thought wars that positive and negative fourth density beings engage in the universe. They ask Ra, like, do positive and negative beings ever battle in the universe? Like, what does that even look like? And Ra says, yes, when a positive and negative fourth density, let's say, craft or civilization, bump into each other in somewhere in hyperspace, how does that interaction go? And Ra says the negative polarity will launch thought objects towards the positive polarity, attempting to depolarize them, influence them, cause them to feel or think negatively. The negative polarity throws their attacks in the form of thought forms. And Ra describes this in some pretty epic descriptions of, you imagine what these thought forms look like. It could be, illusions, hallucinations, all kinds of crazy stuff. But what is the positive polarity doing with all these attacks? Ra says they simply throw up a shield of green ray love, and they lovingly refuse to accept what's being launched at them. So they're talking about the nuances of this interaction of these thought wars. And so Ra says the most accepting and loving energy would be to so love those who wish to manipulate that those entities were surrounded, engulfed, and transformed by positive energies. This, however, being a battle of equals, the Confederation is aware that it cannot, on equal footing, allow itself to be manipulated in order to remain purely positive, for even though pure, it would not be of any consequence, having been placed by the so-called powers of darkness under the heel. It is thus that those who deal with this thought war must be defensive rather than accepting in order to preserve their usefulness and service to others. Thusly, they cannot accept fully what the Orion Confederation wishes to give, that being enslavement. Thusly, some polarity is lost due to this friction, and both sides, if you will, must then regroup. It has not been fruitful for either side. The only consequence which has been helpful is a balancing of the energies available to this planet so that these energies may have less necessity to be balanced in space-time, thus lessening the chances of planetary annihilation. So these first two paragraphs are really Ra discussing the analogy of an abusive relationship on the fourth density scale of things. So essentially, the analogy is the same. When a negative fourth density craft approaches a positively polarized fourth density craft, the negative tries to enslave the positive. This is their only function. And so they launch thought objects to attack them, and the positive just says, no, thank you, we love you, no, thank you, we love you, until there's a stalemate and they both go their separate ways, because both will eventually lose polarity. So in the same way, when we see an imbalance in our world, if we don't deal with it and address it and balance it, it's going to keep accumulating negative karma, and there will be some coming annihilation of that karma, right? There will be some expression, culmination, manifestation of that issue we've allowed to remain imbalanced. So in a romantic partnership, if there's this ongoing conflict between you and your partner that hasn't been really dealt with and healed and forgiven, as we all know, right, it will come up at some point. And when it does, it's going to be an explosive come up. It's not going to be a peaceful, loving conversation because you've allowed that negative karma, that imbalance, to keep building and festering. So Ra makes this point clear. We are to never accept the request for enslavement, control, abuse from another. That's not a function of the positive polarity. We just have to not infringe on their free will. That's all we're asked to do. We're not asked to accept abuse from anybody. So you see, there are no balancing of equal opposites, right? You have to honor the opposite by allowing it to be on its chosen path, and while you remain on your chosen path. That's what balance looks like. And so there's nuance to this, right? I'm not saying the moment somebody in your life is abusive towards you, never speak to them again. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if there's a pattern of abuse and you try to address it and you lovingly communicate that you don't want to have that kind of relationship with them, and then if you're going to have a relationship, whether it's a friendship, a romantic, doesn't matter. If you're going to have a relationship, it has to be under these terms. We have to strive to love each other, to give each other the space to be where we are, to not judge each other. And if somebody can't do that, or isn't at least trying not to do that, then they're showing you their choice. They don't want to be in a loving relationship with you, right? They want to be in an abusive relationship with you. They're not willing to change their habits yet. So you, as a positively polarized being of love, have to say, okay, you've made your choice clear. I accept you where you are, and I love you where you are. Go your way, my brother, my sister. You see the difference there? We're not advocating for a heartless cutting off of people from our life. We're saying, do all you can do to establish forgiveness and wholeness and healing. You know, Jesus said, if your brother sins against you, go to your brother and address the concern. If your brother doesn't listen to you, take another brother with you and the two of you have the conversation. If they still don't listen, bring 3 or 4 brothers with you. And if they still don't listen, then say, okay, got it. You've made your choice. We've made every attempt to reconcile. You refused. And so I accept that. That's okay. We don't have to be in loving relationship. I would never force you to do such a thing. And you exit that physical relationship. In your heart, you always love them. If you ran into them on the street, you would greet them with love, and you're not putting them out of your heart in any way. That is not what we're saying. Very much the opposite. Put them in your heart, but because they're in your heart, you want to honor their path and let them be on their abusive path, right? So it's extremely imbalanced and unloving to both people involved to allow an abusive relationship to continue. Hopefully we all see this now. When you have a loving conversation with somebody who's not behaving lovingly towards you, and you let them know, hey, these are the only kind of relationships I want. I don't want us to talk to each other like that. I don't want to talk to you like that. I don't want you to talk to me like that. So let's talk about how we can have a loving relationship here. And if they're not buying what you're selling, if they're not interested, then you just say, okay, I've laid out the terms. I've given you a chance to accept or deny. And so I honor your free will choice. You clearly don't want to have that kind of relationship. And so I honor that. Go your way, I'll go my way. Blessings. You see, in that exchange, nobody loses. It's the only real goal of any loving relationship, right? Do no harm. Loving relationship doesn't mean grant every request, right? Our goal for any loving relationship is just to do no harm, which really means don't infringe on their free will. So now that we've covered the most extreme example of balancing in relationships, now let's look at the most probably interesting relationship of all, which is our romantic partnerships. These tend to be the most challenging and charged relationships because they expose our imbalances the most. And that's why I often say romantic relationships, probably the best possible mirror we have in this life, probably the best design that Source has given us for reflections. And so how do we keep these relationships balanced with our partners, especially if our partner is not on the same spiritual frequency as us? With all the principles we've covered so far, hopefully you will have a much easier time understanding this dynamic. First of all, it is impossible to be in a truly loving relationship that doesn't feel like one. It's impossible that you could be in a truly loving relationship that didn't feel like one. Here's what I mean. If we feel like something is off in our relationship, something is. 100% of the time. Never, ever gaslight yourself to say, something feels off here, but I'm sure it's all perfectly loving and harmonized. No, if it was perfectly loving and harmonized, you would absolutely know, right? There is no missing absolute alignment. It is the most obvious thing in the universe. It's as if every cell of your being cries out, yes, this is the way God meant it to be. You can't miss alignment, my friends. So if you feel like there's an imbalance, there is. Let's get that off the table. What do you do about it? Well, when we start a conflict or we have a disagreement ensues, let's say that, we will feel a negative emotion if we step beyond the boundaries of love. We will feel a negative emotion towards ourselves. Let's put it that way. You may feel a sadness for your partner, like you'll feel their pain, and it can feel painful, right? When you empathize with where your partner's coming from. You can feel that kind of pain, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're out of balance, because it's good to feel the energy of others, right? It's when you feel a negative emotion in or towards yourself, anger, fear, sadness, when you get charged up, that means you have stepped out of alignment with love in your perception. And so thank you, emotion, for showing me that I just created an imbalance in my mind. So feeling is the most important dynamic for spiritual balancing, in my opinion. Having a heavy attunement to your feelings is the most important asset for spiritual balancing, because it is our only compass or guide for knowing when there is an imbalance, is that we feel it. You can't really mentally think your way through if there's an imbalance somewhere. And you don't need to, because your feelings are already showing you. So when we notice a feeling of imbalance, perhaps we leave the conflict feeling enraged or hurt and upset or anxious and paranoid. We have created an imbalance in our mind through one of the three beliefs, right? If we feel enraged, well, that's because we have an attachment of our partner. We have an expectation of them that they're apparently not meeting. You shouldn't behave that way. It makes me so angry when you act like that. Well, it makes you angry because you have an expectation that they shouldn't, right? Why should you expect somebody not to get drawn up in their own distortions when they get triggered? You should absolutely expect somebody to get drawn up in their distortions if they have distortions. Why would you not want anyone to hold that against you, right? If you have a moment of weakness and you get drawn up in your ego, you would want someone to say, hey, I understand. You got triggered, you were upset, hit a sensitive spot. I get it. It happens to the best of us. We all want that treatment, right? But we have to extend it to other people if we want it for ourselves. So you definitely shouldn't expect your partner not to get upset at you or betray your trust or any distortion they have, right? Give your partner the freedom to have the distortions they have. Don't have expectations of them to behave better than they're behaving, or else you're going to feel angry, right? So that's your own imbalance, right? You had an expectation they didn't meet. Don't force them to meet it. Get rid of it is the answer. Balance it, correct it, heal it. If you leave a conflict feeling really sad and depressed, then you're believing that you just lost something from that interaction, right? The love has been tarnished, hurt, damaged, destroyed. The relationship, it's irreparable. Oh, woe is me. You're believing in lack, right? That's your own imbalance, not theirs. You can't force them to love you if you feel like they stopped loving you. You can just love yourself and refuse to believe that they can steal love from you. So it's your own imbalance, yeah? Even then, if you leave a conflict afraid that they might leave you or cheat on you or whatever the fear is, you're trying to control them. You believe you can control them. And in all three instances, it's our own problem here, right? We are believing in the ego's three beliefs, one or all of them, and so our negative emotions are triggering that. So in truth, every single interaction you have with someone is an opportunity for spiritual balancing. If we're not leaving an interaction feeling love and peace in our heart, then there's something we need to balance. And so this is something you all can absolutely experience, and Let me know in the chat if you have experienced this. Maybe you have had lots of conflicts with your partner, and in the past you always blew up and got enraged and fell into the drama. And through these teachings and these practices, you've slowly integrated more heart-based consciousness, and now you find yourself able to stay in your heart during an intense conflict. Who has experienced that? Yeah, lots of you, right? So I'm not making this up. This isn't just some pie in the sky thing. You can absolutely raise your SQ to the level that somebody else's imbalances don't cause you to lose balance. So they could be screaming at you. And guess what? When you are truly living from the heart, when you are truly living from fourth density consciousness, the more imbalanced they get, the more love and compassion you feel. When someone's screaming in rage, all you can experience is the energy behind their actions, which is fear and pain and all the negative feelings that are driving their anger. And you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're so full of anger. Like, that must really hurt. And you have empathy. And so you can hold space for your partner's anger. And you say things like, I understand everything you just said. Is there anything else you want to express? I want to hear you out completely. You would say those things when you're coming from love. And again, you watch those burning coals on their head, depolarizing their anger. Or really, it's more like pouring water over their head that's steaming with anger, right? It's very depolarizing. So if I'm upset, there's something I need to balance. If we review an interaction and we say to ourselves, wow, I really got wound up in my ego there. Some of those things I said were really not fair or loving. This happens all the time, right? On the spiritual path. When you're trying to integrate and embody fourth density consciousness and you're in a conflict with your partner, they're accusing you of things you feel are not true and not fair. It's very difficult, right? Not to get wrapped up in that. But that's not true. I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. That's not right. And you want to argue your points. And you have the right to do that, of course, but you have to listen to them first and let them fully express their perspective towards you before you jump into chop up what they're saying, right? Don't take it seriously. Don't take it personally. They're just trying to get off their chest the negative energy they're holding, right? And they're hoping that you can be a safe landing space, whether they say that or not. And usually they don't, right? If they're angry and yelling and screaming or whatever, crying and hysterical, just hold space, right? Dare to be in that silent space with someone as they're in their die-off, as they're in their ego and they're charged up with negative energy. Dare to be with them in that space, and you'll watch miracles happen. But then, after you hear them out, and you let them know you hear them, and you don't have any resistance to their perspective, then you can offer your perspective. And so oftentimes in these interactions, in the moment, you'll not be fully sure. You'll be thinking you're coming from the heart. And then when you review the situation later, as you're doing your catalyst journal in the evening, you'll say, gosh, you know what? I really did say some stuff that wasn't fully coming from love. And it was a bit unfair of me to say that. I want to make that right. So you're noticing the negative karma you created through your interactions. So guess what, guys? You're not doomed to suffer from that negative karma. You just have to balance it. So our knight in shining armor that comes to save the day, whenever we notice we've created an imbalance or negative karma, is forgiveness. Forgiveness we should see as our Superman, our superhero, wearing the shiny cape, coming to the rescue. We throw the bat signal up in the sky. Who can save us? Forgiveness is here to save the day. I'm here to save you. What do you need? Please help me forgive this person who I've harmed and forgive myself for harming them. Forgiveness swoops right in, fixes the whole situation, balances the karma, and swoops away back into the sky. That's what forgiveness does, you guys. It balances all karma. And so if you do notice that you've harmed somebody, then what you would want to do is to go to them and say, hey, that conversation we had yesterday, I just want to let you know, after thinking about it, I don't think it was very fair when I said XYZ, and I just want you to know I'm sorry if that hurt you in any way. I love you and I never want to hurt you. I was just trying to express my opinion. Please forgive me. And whether they forgive you or not, 99% of the time they will. But even if they don't, you've already balanced the karma. Again, you can't force somebody to forgive. You can just forgive. You can just repent. Yeah? So this happens in any case where a partner is triggered or angry. And we are very aware of that moment of not wanting to create an imbalance. We only have to look at the nature of the interaction. Love, as we know here, is giving and receiving. Fear, or ego, is taking and keeping. So we have positive polarity, giving and receiving. Negative polarity, taking and keeping. These are the only two functions ever happening in any interaction, period. That's the only way you can interact with somebody, or they with you. You can give and receive, or you can take and keep, or take and withhold, right? So can you be aware of, was there any energy of taking and keeping in my interaction with them? That's a really good question to ask if you want to scan for imbalances in your relationship. And it takes practice, right? You'll get better at identifying your own patterns of taking and keeping. But this is one of our principal teachings here, right? That we hammer, and it's all through our foundations course, right? Loving relationship is giving and receiving. Can you receive them where they are right now? Can you accept them? And can you give your love, your polarity, your essence to them freely? So it's like, do they want to be right? Are they arguing with you because they want to be right and they want you to admit you're wrong? Well, then they're taking and keeping, right? They're withholding love from you and attempting to take your agreement from you. They're trying to force you to agree with them. So where can I find the innocence behind their intention, their need to be right? And can I tell them I understand, right? I can always give somebody my understanding. And really that is balancing 101, right? Can I just contemplate their perspective, as we said before, understand where they're coming from, and give them a compassion for it, right? I understand what you're saying. I hear you out. I understand your perspective. And just knowing they have our understanding is very depolarizing to the ego. But once our partner knows that we understand their perspective, even if we may see things differently, in almost all cases, this will depolarize their anger and diffuse the negative energy. It's so powerful, you guys. It's just that it tends to be hard to do, right? But when you do it with sincerity, every time you're going to watch miracles happen. You're going to watch a new look come behind their eyes. A light will appear behind their eyes, a softening, a depolarization of the negative will happen, and you'll feel them opening to you more. And then you can get into the more intimate nuances of sharing your feelings with each other, right? Once you've depolarized or balanced the intense conflict that's happening. And so if we have a need to be right, or we feel wronged and are offended by it, then the conflict has to continue, right? I'm keeping the war alive in my mind by not forgiving them, not understanding them. So there can be no balance here, right? There can be no balance between two people who both think they are right and the other is wrong. We just went over this, right? Two completely opposite perspectives can't be balanced in the sense of 50-50. There's no 50-50 between love and fear, between truth and illusion. The only way to balance opposites is to let them be opposites, right? The positive honors the negative and doesn't infringe and try to change them. So ACIM has a lot of really amazing things to say about this. This idea that they're on the positive polarity, balancing always looks like a win-win. This is huge. True balance, true forgiveness, true salvation, as the Course puts it, cannot require sacrifice of anybody. So balance in a conflict where one partner thinks they're right and the other thinks they're right and they're duking it out. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. Balance doesn't look like one of the partners conceding defeat and saying, okay, I'm wrong and you are right. And then, okay, let's move on. That's not balance, right? Let's look at what A Course in Miracles says balance looks like. I am not asked to make a sacrifice to find the mercy and the peace of God. That's huge. I am not asked to make a sacrifice. What does that mean? I'm not asked to violate my own polarity in some way. I'm not asked to give up anything good to find peace. The end of suffering cannot come through loss. The gift of everything can be but a gain. You only give, you never take away. This is talking to God. God only gives and never takes away. And God never takes away what is true, what is good, what is loving, yeah? God will absolutely take away our illusions if we offer them up, but that's because illusions aren't real. What is real and actual can never be taken from us, and God doesn't will to take anything real from us. That's the point here. It says, "And you created me to be like you, so sacrifice becomes impossible for me as well as you. I too must give, and so all things are given unto me forever and forever." That's the law of the kingdom of heaven. You get to keep whatever you're willing to give. As long as you're in the mode of giving it, you get to keep it and enjoy it forever. Next quote. So this is from the text, and it says, "How can you win when he must lose?" And it's describing, a brother, somebody you're in conflict with. How can you win when he must lose? If you think you're right and they're wrong, how can you win while he loses? He also thinks that he's right and you're wrong. So it says, he doesn't understand a zero-sum game, where every gain he makes, he loses. No one can lose and everyone gain. You win by giving. He cannot understand a game of giving, for no one gets until he gives. So this is amazing, you guys. If you're in conflict with somebody and they're not able to be on the same frequency as you, meaning they're not giving you the same love and patience and understanding, that's because they can't. They don't understand it. They're still stuck in the ego and they think they're right? They don't understand the law of giving and receiving. It's like if they understood it, they would give you the same energy that they want from you, right? If they want you to be agreeable and understanding, they would be agreeable and understanding to you. If they're not acting like that, they don't understand the law. So you can't force them to. How do you balance that relationship? Again, same principles. You just stay true to who you are and you don't infringe upon who they are. It's really that simple. The nuance is in the actual day-to-day interpersonal interactions, every interaction will be unique and it will require a unique approach to that principle, right? Every conflict is a different conflict. So you can't create pre-planned ways of interacting with people. But what you can do is you can embody and understand and love these principles of balancing, that for me to stay balanced, I only have to stay in my heart towards everyone and let them be where they are and not infringe on them. And the farthest I can go to change someone is to merely offer them the opportunity for a new perspective. And I let them accept or deny it. I'm not trying to force them to accept my offering. I'm not trying to force them to agree with my offering. I want them to make the free choice. Hey, do you want reconciliation here? Do you want forgiveness and healing here? I'm going to offer it to you. Let's agree to disagree or whatever. And maybe they say, no, I am right and I won't agree to disagree. You say, okay, no problem. And from then on out, you're not interested in perpetuating that conflict. You can let them know that and say, hey, whenever you're ready to talk about this without the need to be right and the arguing, I'm ready for it. I'm here for you. But we've gone as far as we can go. We don't agree on perspectives, and I've offered you the only solution I can, which is let's just agree to disagree and love each other and forgive each other and move on. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. You don't have to do that. But I have to be true to my polarity. So I am not interested in being involved in any relationship that's not loving anymore. This is the basic practical essence of spiritual balancing in relationships that I want you guys to understand today. Is it's all about being true to your polarity and letting them be true to theirs. In the kingdom of heaven, everyone wins together and no one wins alone. So even by refusing to give in to the negative demands of another, they're still winning by you denying their request. Why? Because their free will is still fully intact. So they win. It's always a win when somebody's free will is not infringed upon. So our only goal should be not to infringe on free will and be true to our free will. That's the one standard we have to apply to every relationship if we want balance. Both sides can walk away the victor so long as we can just understand, accept each other where we are, and we can agree to disagree. Perfectly fine, right? Perfectly fine way to handle a conflict. But both sides have to do it if it's going to work. And if only you do it and they don't do it, then it won't work in the sense that they're going to still hang on to that conflict against you. They're going to still hang on to that bitterness against you. And so it's going to influence their behavior, and it's going to probably lead to an eventual breaking up, right? if they don't heal and grow, it will lead to that, because you have to be true to your polarity. And this is tough, right? Especially with romantic partners. It's really tough when you've been married to somebody for 10 or 20 years and you come to these teachings and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been in an abusive relationship with my husband for 10 years, 20 years, and I'm now just realizing it. My husband controls my behavior, or maybe my wife controls my behavior. But you notice this fact, right? And now you're like, okay, I want to live these principles. I want to be true to my polarity, and I want to live from heart-based consciousness. Well, then you can try your best to apply those principles in your relationship. But at the end of the day, if your partner's not interested in being on that level with you, you have to say, okay, I've tried. I've presented my offering to you over and over again to give you every chance to accept it and change your ways and enter a loving relationship with me. And if your partner consistently denies your request, and I don't even mean like a verbal request, I mean, you're in the kitchen and your husband or wife is like, I told you to wash the dishes 2 hours ago. Why haven't you done it yet? And you say, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I got caught up doing this task. I'll be happy to wash the dishes now. And your partner's like, yeah, that's right, you'll wash the dishes, and walks out of the room. You just offered a request for them to be loving towards you. How? Because you gave that to them. So by giving them a certain energy that's different than, because look, if you had given them a negative energy, they would have returned the favor, right? They would have given back what you gave as well. So by giving, you're really offering something, and they can accept or deny it. If they're in a negative energy and you offer negative energy, they're going to accept it, right? They're going to accept it real quick because their ego's looking for the fight. Yeah, let's war. Let's go to battle. Let's see who's going to be the victor. And so when you don't give that energy and you say a loving response that is an attempt to neutralize the situation, and your partner doesn't respond with a similar energy, then they have shown you, I'm not interested in diffusing this conflict with you. I'm interested in keeping this conflict with you. So you see, there's a lot being said in the dynamics of the relationship and the interaction. So we're not just talking about a verbal request, although you can verbally request your partner to make these changes in the relationship. You definitely can sit down and say, hey, I've come into these understandings and I want us to be in a loving relationship. Do you want that? Well, yeah, I do. Okay, well, let's talk about what that looks like. And you go through it. You can definitely do that, and you should do that. But if on a day-to-day basis, you're returning love for attack and they're not returning your love for love, if they're returning attack for love, they are denying your request. Do you see that? That's what the Course meant in the verse we just read, where it says something like he doesn't accept what you have offered. That's what it means, is like the essence of who you're being towards them is what you're offering them. And if they're consistently not trying to meet you on that same frequency, they don't want it. And so you have to be okay with that. And sometimes we have to make those tough decisions to say, well, it would not be loving for me to stay in this relationship. And it's not loving for them for me to stay in this relationship, because I'm just going to enable and perpetuate their abusive behaviors. So you have to come to see in yourself, you guys. And I hope everyone who's in this situation is really listening to this part, because this is how you can move through this very challenging situation with clarity and peace of mind. Is as long as you have come to this conclusion in yourself of, look, I have made every attempt to offer my partner a loving relationship. I am not giving into their attacks. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm not going tit for tat anymore. And they're consistently trying to still go tit for tat with me when I'm offering forgiveness and reconciliation. Then they have denied your request. And you have to come to peace with that. But when you do come to peace with that, then leaving that relationship will be much easier. Leaving relationships is only hard when we think we're leaving something good on the table, when we think we've still done something wrong or haven't done enough. That's usually what we suffer from in these kind of breakups or whatever in relationships, is I could have done more. Maybe I didn't try hard enough. So you need to go to every length you can go while staying true to your polarity to try to make a reconciliation, to offer a loving relationship every day, over and over, consistently, until you feel that you have seen sufficient proof that your partner is genuinely not interested in a loving relationship. They're not healed enough. They're not aware enough. to go beyond their patterns. And so love says, okay, I will not force you to do so anymore, my beloved. You go enjoy your path that you have chosen. I give you the freedom to be on your path of negativity and resentment. And I'll let you go find anyone else you want to be in that kind of relationship with. I personally do not want to be in that kind of relationship. So I forgive you. I forgive myself. I hold nothing against you. It's all played out perfectly. It's all been a great reflection. And now it's no longer of service to me. I have seen the reflection. I have picked up the phone. I've heard the call. And now it's time to hang up the phone. That is admittedly hard to do. It takes a lot of spiritual maturity to do that. But it is what we are asked to do by love. This is how we stay in balance, is be true to our polarity while allowing them to be true to theirs. Simple enough, yeah? That is the essence of spiritual balancing in any type of human relationship.